We are presenting today on navigating EUDAMED, and we're really excited about this topic, really excited to have Danielle on our team presenting on this topic. So we have throughout the presentation some polls just to gauge kind of your familiarity with things, where you are in the process, if you have started this, any specific concerns you have at your company or with your product specifically. And then we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. We've received some pre-submitted questions we'll start with, but if anything comes up throughout the meeting that you are curious on, you can submit those within the question box, similar to how you shared where you're coming from today. So we also have Jasmine on our team, another regulatory affairs consultant. She'll be monitoring the question box, so you can get your questions answered there. If we don't get to your question, we'll make sure that you get a response via email. We'll follow up with you. So without further ado, we have Daniëlle Sleegers, our Director of Regulatory Affairs and PRRC at MedEnvoy. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Megan. Exciting to be here and exciting to share some of our knowledge regarding EUDAMED. So let's get started. So today, as already in the introduction to our webinar, we will discuss both UDIs in general and specific EUDAMED matters, putting this into a global perspective, give you an introduction in EUDAMED, timelines, kind of registrations required, so actor, device registrations. We will discuss special cases, touch upon responsibilities of importers as well, what to do with legacy devices in EUDAMED, discuss submission options, ongoing responsibilities, because once in, it's not done. This is something that needs to be done during the full life cycle of a device. We touch upon UDI compliances across multiple regions, and I close with key takeaways, and as indicated by Megan, after that we will do the FAQ session. So to start this off, I want to introduce a real-world scenario. Currently already, we are questioned by our customers in situations where they experience issues with the distribution of medical devices from outside Europe to Europe. Issues can arise from non-compliant labeling, UDI labeling not compliant, but also in the future potentially information not included in EUDAMED. So imagine that, for example, a UDI is on your label, but it doesn't have the correct barcoding format. Currently, already we experience customers that have shipment stopped, specifically in Spain, but also Italy, other countries also raise issues. And then, obviously, those devices will not meet potentially the patients in time. So there are interruptions in your supply chain, potential losses of revenues, and for sure there are compliance findings. Considering that we are in a data-driven environment, and having EUDAMED as one of the key databases for the devices that will be placed on the market in Europe, readily available, these compliance checks, which will be which are currently already governed by the market surveillance regulation, that will just intensify and complicate things if we go along. So getting things right from the start is important. So as a first poll, because I know a lot of companies already have some experience here, I wanted to ask you, did you already encounter these issues?
Yes, so the first question we have is, what is the current status of your organization's UDI implementation for the EU? So go ahead and respond on that, please. Okay, so majority so far are saying completed and compliant, and runner-up to that is in progress, labeling update, system setup. And then a mix of the others.
Yeah, so I think, well, thanks for sharing. And then just for everyone, for the medical devices, the last mandatory deadline of the 26th of May this year was reached. So that also means now that the lower classes, the class ones, also should have compliant UDI labeling at this stage. But so where did that UDI, why is UDI important? Why is EUDAMED raised? Well, in fact, to give you a little bit of background, that was all contributed to concerns that arose in the past, where there were issues with metal-to-metal, PIP implants, and when regulatory authorities look back on those cases, so major recalls, there were frequent issues with traceability, so tracing devices to actually the patients involved, and ultimately that triggered regulations putting in place. So at the front runner was the US, and they launched their UDI rule in 2013. And also when you read that implementation role, they indicated that challenges during recall and adverse event investigation was the main reason why introduction of a coding system or unique traceability system was important. In fact, followed by Europe. So the whole MDR recital also cross-references that traceability failures in the past, specifically also the large PIP scandal, was key driver for the implementation of the MDR, introducing into Europe the UDI and EUDAMED requirements. But also it's not limited to these two key markets. We see globally a trend to adoption and implementation of related UDI requirements and corresponding databases. First one in line in Europe, for example, is SwissOmed, which is close to Europe, but also Australia now already indicated that they will have mandatory timelines starting as of. So these databases, as indicated, they are there to provide overview of devices placed on that specific market, ensure traceability, and typically how that is done is by having a UDI on that label, which can either be read out by automated data capture, so like barcode scanning, or we can read it as a human, and then we read typically the string, which is then called the human readable interpretation. These UDIs, they are linked to UDI databases, of which EUDAMED is the European version, and ultimately globally it's the objective to prevent counterfeit fraud, ensure full traceability throughout the supply chain, ensure very quick oversight in case of post-market surveillance issues, and tracking devices ultimately to patients. There are different entities involved that issue UDIs. As examples, it's GS1, it's the key one, the key organization here, covering almost 80% of all the UDIs issued globally. So when we look at the different territories now, so all these different territories, they have their own UDI requirements, their own related UDI databases. And when we then look at EUDAMED, and we can see and look at the number of data fields included, we see that that is by far the biggest database if we reach the full state of implementation. So in total, approximately 130 data fields for a medical device, compared to, for example, 64 when we compare it to the other big database, which was in fact the first one out there, which was the GUDE database with 64 data fields. So although similar in nature, similar in objective, there are clear differences, and that also comes with challenges for manufacturers, and that is something we will discuss during this webinar, which obviously will focus on EUDAMED mainly. Putting timelines a little bit in perspective, so Europe for sure was not at the front end of implementation of the UDI, so we are kind of meteor adopters. It was FDA starting early on, 2014, 2018. Now focus is in Europe with device registration module expected next year. And then, but also now SwissDamed. So Swissmedic has announced that SwissDamed will be live and mandatory as of July 1st next year. And the same, TGA did the same. So OSDIT will be mandatory for class 3 devices as of mid next year as well. So ultimately, UDI and UDI databases, it's not something just a quick project or a one-time project. This is something that needs to be addressed during the life cycle of the device, and all these different timelines and different requirements need to be well managed to ensure global compliance. Quickly going back to the UDI, a UDI is a unique identifier of a device which in fact ensures traceability of the device. It consists of two parts, a device identifier and a product identifier, and there are some rules related to issuing specifically the PI data, what should be there. So in fact, if you are a user and you can find information on the label, it is a general expectation that that information is also coded into either your barcode or your data matrix. And so I listed out some specifics. So for example, PI, common PIs are your lot number, your serial number, your software ID, your expiration date, always be in the in your data string. Your manufacturing date only needs to be there if it's the only identifier, and otherwise it's kind of optional.
We do have another poll. So the next question is, where is your organization today with UDI database registrations in different markets? So you can select more than one here if that applies. Okay, looks like majority right now it's pretty split between FDA and EU.
Yeah, which makes sense, correct? Because in fact, if you are a medical device manufacturer, either already in the US or having your products placed on the market in the US, you will be in a good database. At the same time, the device registration is possible in EUDAMED, and I will show some numbers on that topic a little bit later on. So I included some frequently asked questions. When do I need to issue a new UDI? Just to be complete, I put it on the slide. We will not go into a lot of detail there. But I think the main key to remember is that if you have UDI, that can only be linked to one basic UDI. And the basic UDI is a specific concept only applicable to Europe, which is taken over also for the Swiss market. And we will go a little bit in more detail there. What is important to understand is that if you are a manufacturer which has multiple UDI carriers on your labeling, you need to clearly identify the one applicable to Europe, And for that, there is an international symbol included in the labeling standard, so in the ISO 152231 standard. But generally, it's anticipated that you will always have your data matrix there with your string. So looking at the basic UDIDI, the concept introduced with the MDR, that's a regulatory identifier. It's not part of your labeling. It's a key to records included in the UDI database in EUDAMED, and it clusters devices with the same intended purpose, risk class, essential design, and manufacturing characteristics. And it will end up on regulatory documents like your declaration of conformity, certificates, and in on specific tech file documentation as well. So new was also introduced a master UDIDI because we have very highly individualized devices. Contacts, lenses, and frames specifically are now identified by the European Commission. And the European Commission realized that if these manufacturers need to include all their devices on the actual lowest level into EUDAMED, EUDAMED will be overloaded and will not be able to catch up. So for that purpose, they introduced the master UDIDI, which is a kind of sub-level between the basic UDIDI and the UDIDI. Initial implementation was already planned for this year. That has been expanded. So now EUDAMED is expected to be able to handle these devices as of next year. A mandatory implementation for the master UDIDI to be on the label in EUDAMED now for contact lenses in 2026, and spectacle frames behind my picture, it's 2028. I included the NDCG guidance on this topic, so if this is applicable to your device, closely monitor the related guidance documents because we are still awaiting more details and potentially timelines for implementation can change over time. Important to understand the UDI requirements as that is closely related how to upload your document or your data into EUDAMED. So each level of a device, packaging level of a device, will have its own UDI, starting with the lowest level of packaging being the primary package. That UDIDI will be referred to as your primary UDIDI. That's the key UDI in the EUDAMED database, and it's also the UDI that is linked to the basic UDIDI. If you have different layers of packaging, each packaging layer will have to get its own packaging DI, but only shippers, so logistic units, are exempt of that requirement. So if your lowest level of packaging would have the same device, for example, twice, so for example, two syringes in a pill pouch, then you need to allocate also a unit of use DI, and that is to ensure that there is traceability of the device to the use of by the individual patient. If that is the case, you are required to also include that information into EUDAMED, but that will also be shown a little bit later on in this presentation as well. So now let's start with actual EUDAMED. So EUDAMED introduced with the implementation of the MDR, IVDR, and implementation requirements have been updated with the gradual rollout of EUDAMED as part of EU 2024-1860. So the general process currently is the European Commission is developing a minimum viable product. They test that out in the playground, but also by a dedicated test teams. And then there is an independent audit by the EC Commission. If they consider a module fit for purpose, then there will be a formal audit report. If then, based upon the audit report, the decision will be made, yes, this is a viable module, there will be an official publication in the official journal of the European Union. And after that publication, there is a 6-month period. And after that, use of that module becomes mandatory. So looking at EUDAMED consists of 6 modules: an actor registration, a device registration module, a module in which notified bodies can upload, are identified and can upload related certificates. There will be a module related to clinical investigations and performance studies. There is a module on post-market surveillance and vigilance, and there is a market surveillance module dedicated for the competent authorities and oversight by the European Commission. So I included the actors or the economic operators that will be involved in the modules. So for the actor module, it will be applicable to manufacturers, authorized reps, importers, also SPP producers, and they will also all play a role in the device module. Certificates, etc., only by the notified body, but what also will be an important module for both manufacturers as well as ARs will be the vigilance module, but that one is not planned to go live early next year. So Megan, I believe we have some additional polls.
Yes. How experienced are you with EUDAMED registration? No prior experience, some familiarity, no submissions yet, completed at least 1 registration, or a regular managed EUDAMED submission. Okay, it's a little bit all over the board. Right now, no prior experience is in the lead, followed by some familiarity, no submissions yet. All right, thank you.
Yeah, and then we have another one. So this is,
yes.
That's correct.
Has your organization completed actor registration in EUDAMED? Okay, majority so far is yes, we are fully registered and have our SRN, and then followed by unsure, I don't know. Okay, thank you. Next poll.
Yeah. Next polls will be on the device registration specifically.
Yes, how are you managing your MDR, IVDR devices in relation to EUDAMED? Okay, majority right now is saying planning to register before deadline, followed by we're already registered, and then close behind that is we do not have certified MDR, IVDR devices at this stage. Thank you for sharing. I think we have one more before we move on.
The headache, legacy devices.
How are you managing legacy devices without a CE certificate under MDR, IVDR in relation to EUDAMED? And right now, majority don't have legacy devices, but for those that do, it's pretty split between we're already registered or we're planning to register before deadlines. And then followed by unsure. Thank you.
So let's go. So in fact, the ones that already registered in EUDAMED, so the active registrations, there are currently, when we log into EUDAMED, we can see that there are over 28,000 manufacturers currently registered, but the estimate is that the final number will be close to 80,000. So whether that will be true, we only will know after the actor registration will be mandatory, but we are underway, let's put it that way. Currently, 2,500 authorized reps in, 9,000 importers, system and producer packs, 1,300, and quite some devices are in. Also, quite some certificates are in, but this is just a starting point. As indicated by the graph, the timeline of EUDAMED, it would be live when we would have the implementation date of the MDR. That was not bad. There was a planning. Ultimately, the best educated guess was, okay, the Commission will indeed make that publication in the journal in July, which then would result in starting the mandatory actor registrations in January 2026. The fact that there has been no publication despite positive audit results lets us a little bit in the dark. So yes, Q1 can still be met if they publish quickly. Otherwise, it will be later, most likely then it will be Q2, but for sure it will not be delayed. So being proactive is key, because we will see that there are really some issues that can be encountered when you start doing your actor and or your device registration, and it's better to be on top of issues rather than fighting deadlines later on. So discussing now the actor registration, as some of you already indicated that you don't have an actor registration yet. So the economic operators, manufacturers, system pack producers, ARs, importers need to register as an actor in EUDAMED, and distributors are excluded. So from that, the general public will have visibility over this data. Not all data is shared with the general public. There are more details available to competent authorities, for example. But in general, these are the actors that that will be mentioned. And the steps that are followed to register as an actor is to first get a EUDAMED account. Everyone can apply, and I put the link in the presentation, and we will share the presentation after the webinar. So you need to submit that actor registration request, and if you are a foreign manufacturer, then it is the EAR that first verifies that request as a first gatekeeper. They will check whether the information is correct, whether the information is consistent with the mandate in place, and if they approve, then the application or the request is forwarded to the national competent authority. And if they do the same review, and if they agree with the application, approve the application, you will be issued your actor registration. And for manufacturers, that is also cross-referenced as the SRN, the single registration. So what kind of information is needed? And I know a lot of you already will have done this, but for those who did not, so you need to apply, and then you share your organization name, objective evidence, organization identifier, so your related VAT information, etc. You need to upload a document that validates the existence of your company. You need to sign off a declaration on information security. You need to share information who is your person responsible for regulatory compliance for manufacturers and EARs. If you're a manufacturer, you need to upload your EUDAMED mandate and information who is your EAR and the related competent authority. So to select the competent authority, that's predefined. So for European manufacturers, that should be the competent authority in which the actor is located. For non-EU manufacturers, you need to either select the competent authority where your EAR is located, and for SPP producers, because there is no EAR involved in that case, they need to select the competent authority where the SPP is placed on the market first. So it's not just pick and choose, it is guided, and these are the steps you need to take. So when we look at common issues resulting in rejection of your SRN application, it's incomplete or incorrect documentation. So missing required attachments, incorrectness in the EUDAMED mandate, or missing signatures in the declaration regarding information security. That's always checked by the competent authorities. What we see is sometimes also that the date on which the mandate starts is not the same as the date included in the mandate document that needs to be uploaded. So the consistency checks are important. And also specifically if you are, for example, a DBA, you cannot place DBA in the name. That should be in the abbreviated name. So it's always important that your EAR reviews the information, because for sure otherwise your the competent authority involved will reject the mandate, which obviously then will result in delays. After you have been successful in obtaining your SRN, then you are ready to go to start device registrations. Currently, as indicated, that is possible already. And that, to that end, you start with registration of the basic UDI/DI, basic UDI/DI with one product, one UDI/DI link, and after that, you can add all the other individual devices to that. So in total, there are approximately the 130 data fields to be completed, and we will go over that in a minute. So also here, again, important that there are different roles within the EUDAMED database. There are people that can only view. There are people that can draft the basic UDI/DI and UDI/DI records, but don't have permission to formalize them. And so they can be prepared. Then you can review, and ultimately, when the confirmer approves the drafts, then they are submitted, and they will then be visible in the EUDAMED database. So there are some differences to keep in mind when you are starting to register your legacy devices compared to devices under the regulations. A basic UDI/DI and UDI/DI were not mandatory under the MDD. But still they want to have the full traceability in Europe despite that. So what happens is, if you have a legacy device, they will not be issued a basic UDI/DI, but they will get a EUDAMED/DI. And for your UDI, if you don't have a UDI assigned yourself, then EUDAMED will assign a EUDAMED ID to your products, and you can distinguish the numbers assigned easily by the fact that the equivalent of the basic UDI/DI will get a prefix P, and the equivalent of the UDI/DI will get a prefix D within EUDAMED. So where for regulation devices, you can have one basic UDI/DI and multiple UDI/DIs linked to that. That is not the case with legacy devices. They will just be generated based upon your UDI. So ultimately, that will be reflected in as such in EUDAMED, which provides a longer list and no grouping possibilities for legacy devices. So now let's get into go into the data. As indicated, we have the registration obligation to first group products on a basic EUDAMED level. Then we indicated, oh yes, we group products with the same intended purpose, the same risk class, and the same design and manufacturing characteristics. But that was not specified initially. And now when we look at EUDAMED, it's really clear what kind of data is then considered relevant. So instead of the making a long list, I try to categorize that data. So there is data on the actors, and for sure all the devices in a product in the same device family will have the same actor. They will have the grouping. Typically, the situation is they will have the same risk class, and we will assign a device model, name, etc. But then it's the details regarding the device characteristics where it's clear that if you group UDI-IDIs into a same or link them to the same basic UDI-IDI, also these data fields should be identical. So you cannot have devices that have animal tissue and not with animal tissue within the same basic UDI-IDI. So because your data attributes will not be the same. So here's the whole list. So we have the device characteristics. So on a high level, and then when we go to the next one, you can see that there are device characteristics that are applicable for all devices. Some are specific for medical devices, some are only specific for IVDs. So certificates will be uploaded by the notified body for the MDR devices, and currently not in yet, but in the future, if devices are involved in clinical investigations, those clinical investigation numbers can also be linked and reviewed. So having assigned a basic UDI-IDI included which data fields are applicable to that basic UDI-IDI, then you can start linking your individual devices to that basic UDI-IDI group that is then in EUDAMED. And okay, you link that to your basic UDI-IDI identifier, and you include the individual product information, so your EMDN code, your trade name, your reference or catalog number, your device status, whether the product is on the market, no longer on the market, etc. And that is done on a product level. All these data fields are subject to change during the device lifetime and need to be updated accordingly, which brings admin tasks with this. The list is quite long because we also have information on critical warnings, storing, handling, conditions, etc. So ultimately, it's a lot of data per device that is required to be uploaded into the EUDAMED system. Part of this information is the same as you already did if you uploaded your device information into the GUDA database, although the way that it's done, it's slightly different. So Megan, I believe we have polls.
Yes. Yeah. How is your organization currently preparing UDI data for EUDAMED submission? Okay, majority so far, spreadsheets, manually tracking, and then second to follow is not yet prepared and still in the planning phase. But it looks like spreadsheets is definitely majority.
Yes, big spreadsheets, all kinds of columns, all the products related to that. So that's common practice.
And then the next poll is, what is your biggest challenge with UDI EUDAMED data management? Okay, it looks like it's pretty even between resource constraints, so time, budget, staff, and then understanding regulatory requirements. But shortly following that is data quality and consistency.
Yeah, and I hope that we contributed a little bit to clarity just by listing the individual data fields in a more coherent order for you to understand and cross-reference your own Excel files to see whether all the data fields are in fact captured already to ensure smooth upload into UDAMED. So if we discuss like, okay, all the data will be in UDAMED, not all data will be visible to the general public. For sure, basic UDI, UDI, yes, all of that is. But for example, the mandate that is, for example, uploaded when you are a foreign manufacturer and have assigned an AAR, that information is only visible to the manufacturer themselves, the AR, and the competent authority involved. So that is not available to the general public. The summary information is though. And also it's good to note that UDI PI information is not captured at all in UDAMED, and as such that can also not be queried by the public. Indicated special cases. So importers are considered actors and they have the obligation to check whether products are included in the database after the device module has become mandatory. But that means that if your products are not included in UDAMED after the mandatory date, then if you ship products to Europe, your importer is not allowed to place those products on the market because they will be in compliance breach. So that is also one of the main reasons why it is important to ensure that you have your data uploaded and up to date all the time. And we currently already see some authorities cross-referencing UDAMED despite the fact that it's not mandatory at this stage. Legacy devices, as indicated, legacy devices need to be in UDAMED as long as they are placed on the market. So if new products, new legacy devices are not placed, new placements on the market after the mandatory date of UDAMED registration, those will not be in, but otherwise also legacy devices should be included. Their status should be tracked, so they should actively be updated whether if their placement on the market changed, if they are discontinued, and also this information will be used by competent authorities to monitor compliance. So after transitional provisions date ended, obviously it's the expectation that all those the status of those legacy devices will be not to place them on the market after that date, and there is a big risk of compliance findings at that stage. So common issues identified during a device registration we have encountered so far, and that frequently happen, is despite the fact that there is a basic UDI/IDI issued, even whether it's on certificates, when basic UDI/IDIs are validated, and that is automatically done by UDAMED, it is sometimes identified that the basic UDI/IDI is in fact not a valid basic UDI/IDI, so it has not been generated correctly. And in that case, you are stuck because you cannot upload your data, and you first have to resolve the issue, assigning a new basic UDI, and then update your documentation. So validate carefully your data as soon as possible. Incorrect UDI and basic UDI linkage, device characteristics that are not the same over the whole device group, which went unnoticed during tag file review, but then when you try to upload that information into EUDAMED, you can encounter issues at that stage. And also frequently identified issue is the EMDN code. So the EMDN is linked to the generic device group, and as per definition, that's the fourth level of the EMDN for MDR, and I believe it's the third level for IVDR. But what happens is when you upload your devices, your individual products into EUDAMED, you have to select the lowest level of EMDN code available, which might not be only the fourth level. So if there are 6 levels available, then EUDAMED will not allow you to upload that product until you select the lowest level of that EMDN code. That means then that if you did not do that at that stage, you need to update your technical documentation to reflect that and to ensure that your registration information in EUDAMED is aligned again with that of your technical file. So missing information, missing critical warnings, it's unclear at this stage how that will be surveyed by competent authorities. We have to see that. Notified bodies have some issues with linking certificates, and what also frequently occurs is that there is unclarity which UDIs to use. So again, the key UDI to start the registration in EUDAMED is your primary DI, and after that you can add your different packaging configurations as such. So a lot of data fields to fill, but luckily different methodologies to enter the data. So you can opt for manual data entry, bulk uploads, and if you're a very large manufacturer, you can also opt for machine to machine, which has for sure advantages, but it's also requiring a good understanding of the requirements. Backfalls are upload rejections, missing mandatory attributes, which cause failed uploads, and some ERP systems that are still used by manufacturers are not fit for EUDAMED data exchange at this stage. And also, it's not a one-time in. If your device data changes, you need to update the information that is included in EUDAMED. Who is responsible? Ultimately, it's the responsibility of the manufacturer or the system or procedure pack producer. Authorized rep will have some oversight, and the importer in the supply chain will have to verify that information matches information they can see, for example, on the labeling. So what does it mean? If you have a change in your data, it is expected that EUDAMED is updated within the 30 days for device-related information. If actor-related information is changed, you need to update your information within a week. But even if there are no changes, there is a requirement that you update or at least confirm that your data is still up to date. You have to do that after 1 year after the initial submission, and every 2 years after that. It's currently in that if you are late with doing that, there is a kind of a grace period of 6 months accepted by the member states. However, they can start taking corrective measures after that, jeopardizing a supply of devices, obviously, related to that. Challenges at the horizon, and that horizon is quite close by. Expected EUDAMED implementation. Will it be Q1 2026? Most likely not. Potentially earlier, Q2 2026. EUDAMED, Swissamed, so Swissmedic indicated, well, we go live with our database on the 1st of July. And yes, they indicated, well, we look what Europe is doing. At the same time, they are independent, so they can make up their own mind. And totally unrelated to Europe is Australia, where they indicated that the first data sets for the class 3s will become mandatory in 2026. So to overcome these challenges ahead, it's becoming more and more important to have one way of managing all the data involved. As I showed you, there are different data fields, different data collected in the different databases worldwide. You have to understand the regulatory requirements for each of the regions involved. And to manage that all, please ensure that your QMS is updated to reflect how that is done, how the user rights, etc. are covered, but also when you have your change management procedure in action, it should already consider the implications it has on the UDI databases that are out there. So it's not only focusing on when to assign a new UDI, but specifically how to maintain the data going forward. Some key takeaways. EUDAMED, for sure, not optional. We are still a little bit in the waiting phase for receiving that publication in the official journal. But after that, only 6 months are left. So it's better to start early than later. Preparation is key. Data inconsistency, that is the main pitfall we frequently see. Centralize your data to ensure smooth global submissions, and where possible, engage with partners. And just on that, this is something we also started doing for Europe, collecting the data, ensuring data uploads in EUDAMED. We can do the same in Swissamed and into other databases where we have related services. So please think how you go about your data management and ensure that your data is compliant, consistent during the life cycle of your device going forward. Any questions?
Wonderful. Thank you, Danielle. That was very informative and helpful. We did receive a couple of questions. We just have a few minutes, so maybe we can get through a couple of those. If we don't get to your question, we'll make sure that you do get a reply. We'll send you an email and follow up so you get a reply on that. So we'll start with this one. How long is the typical turnaround time for obtaining a SRN after submission?
Well, okay, the generic answer will be something between 3 and 10 working days. Depends a little bit on the competent authority involved, how detailed do they check, but the basic checks will always be performed as such. Yeah. So typical lead times, 3 to 10 days.
Thank you. What are the top 3 most common submission errors manufacturers make during SRN applications, and how could we avoid?
Well, it was in fact one of the slides. So incomplete documents, inconsistent dates, EUDAMED mandate, or vigilance responsibility outsourced to an EAR if that is applicable, if that is inconsistent with what is provided in the database, application. Those are typical reasons for rejection.
Okay, thank you. If EUDAMED update is missed by a few days, what do you think the likely regulatory response is? Warning, suspension, or other?
Let's first start off having the mandatory device registration and actor registration. But after that, as indicated in the guidelines, so there is some grace period for sure. How they ultimately will implement enforcement, that is something we'll need to experience over time, I expect.
That is good advice. Okay, let's see. Can you share recent examples of how EUDAMED non-compliance has directly delayed market access or triggered enforcement action?
Yeah, I think we recently saw an example where there was a shipment of a manufacturer that already had devices in EUDAMED, but it was not a full set of devices and not all packaging layers. That caused confusion with the Spanish customs, and they hold that shipment until clarification was done. So even that it's not mandatory at this stage, ultimately we already see checks, and I expect those checks will be more frequent going forward.
Okay, we will end it there. Like I said, if we didn't answer your question, we will get back to you and get that answered for you from one of our regulatory affairs consultants. As Danielle mentioned, we do support manufacturers with device registration. So if you go on the last slide, Danielle, back one, we do have a QR code that brings you to that page if you want to check out more information on that. We will share the slides and the recording, so you'll get that in an email, so you'll have access to all of those things, and you can follow up with any additional questions that might come up after the review through that same email. So thank you all for attending. Danielle, any last words from you?
I think it's exciting times how we see how all this data in EUDAMED ultimately will be used. It will be used specifically for post-market surveillance, and there will be so much more transparency going forward. We are not there yet, that's clear.
Great. Well, thank you, and thank you all for joining. We hope to see you on the next one. We'll be in touch with the follow-up materials. Thank you.
Thank you.